Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and I am here with my awesome sister and co host, Rachel Smith.
Hey guys.
We are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through your life and with your relationship with Yahweh. Last week, we did an intro episode on God's design for women's health, and we dove into some pretty nerdy anatomy stuff, sciencey stuff on women's bodies, what body parts and organs we have that men don't have, the endocrine system. We talked about hormones. We talked about our cycles. And I hope that you found it fascinating and that it got you really thinking about just how amazing women's bodies are.
Yeah, we
And
really wanted to lay the groundwork too for this next conversation and the conversations to come to have in mind. Like it was, a very quick kind of lesson on, like you said, the female anatomy, but without like us everybody understanding the point we're coming from, then these next conversations um can it might not all connect. Because
definitely,
we really
yeah.
want to make sure that we're all on the same page of understanding how our endocrine system and our our fertile organs, how they're all working. And
Mhm.
like I like to call it just this like beautiful symphony of hormones and our cycle. And so yeah, we left off with describing a woman's cycle because that really sets up the T for birth control pill and how does that work?
Yeah. Birth control in general. So we're going to talk about a couple different types of birth control. We're going to talk about the pill. I'll mention the ring. There's the implant on, which is an implant, and then there's IUDs. Those are some of the most common. Also, the shot. You can get shot with birth control, which seems like the worst possible option of all of them, but that's just my personal opinion. And again, I'll remind everyone this is not medical advice. We are not doctors. We are women, and we have experienced taking birth control, and we have been told many of the things that you listening have probably heard. There are a lot of misconceptions about birth control. And here's the thing, like, I'm not trying to come after doctors, OBGYNs who are prescribing this stuff. I mean, in some ways, maybe I am, right? Because I'm threatening a part of their bottom dollar by suggesting not to partake in those products. But again, this is about informed consent. At the end of the day, you're going to make your own decisions. I'm not trying to influence your decision with my individual story, but I do want to emphasize that there are thousands of other women like me that have similar stories. So I'm not the only one. The problem, and that is the problem, and why we want to have this conversation is because this isn't talked about enough in an honest way. There's no honest conversation about this because many women see birth control as black or white when it's for birth control purposes, right? Like a lot of us get into this taking of birth control because we have bad periods, and that's what doctors say we have to do to regulate our hormones,
Or
which
like
you're
if
not
you have
regulating them. You're
right, or if you have a
wrecking
health,
them.
yeah, if you have a health issue like endometriosis or something like
Mhm.
that, the the quote unquote treatment that they recommend is putting you on the pill, which isn't a treatment. It's just suppressing symptoms, and
Mhm.
it's and that is just lack of informed consent. So that,
Yeah.
like you said, is our goal here is, you're going
Understand what you're getting yourself into,
right. And
or to know
doctors
that
are,
if you've been gaslit, like you're getting gaslit, and we're here to confirm that you're not nuts. That's the other part of this.
yes.
But kind of what I wanted to say about women in general is there have been times in the past where I tried to talk about birth control, and I've had women get mad at me because they're like, "Why
Mhm.
are you attacking birth control? We need it. We need birth control." And I didn't have an argument back then because I didn't fully understand all of this. But my argument today would be learn about God's design for your body. and hormones, meaning learn how the cycle works and you'll understand that you can only get pregnant 6 days out of the month.
Right.
And when you
Yes.
know that you can get pregnant, what days you potentially are ovulating, there are many ways to do this, and you can use technology to do it too by tracking your basal body temperature is a way that you can do it and be pretty accurate about it. Also in conjunction with your cervical, I don't like that they call it mucus. I think that's so
I
rude.
say
It should
fluid.
cervical fluid or mucus, but even
It
still,
is
like they couldn't have
mucusy.
given it a nicer name. Come on.
Cervical
So
gel.
something. The point is, there are ways to do this, and the more that we learn about our bodies, the more empowered we can be. So I
Yes.
guess let me just invite you, if you're listening and you kind of feel hostile towards this conversation because you don't want to get pregnant, say a prayer right now and pray that the Lord will open your heart to potentially learning something new or having a different perspective. Because there's the other side of it too, which is, and I don't know if we want to go that deep on this episode, but why are you wanting to prevent pregnancy? That's another avenue to go down, and perhaps another conversation for another day is the word birth control and controlling our fertility, that we want to be in control of it and like we are God and make
Mhm.
the decision on when we want to get pregnant and when we don't. And when we don't want it, we are willing to sacrifice the health of our bodies to stop its normal functions from happening. And then we have health issues as a result. Don't understand why we have health issues. We go to doctors, they have no clue why we're having health issues. If it's depression, they're just going to give you another pill
Mhm.
and tell you, take this and that'll fix that problem. If you have something else going on, they're going to give you a pill for that. And then you're just putting pills on top of pills, trying to solve for problems that were started from taking synthetic hormones in the first place. If you went that route, right? There's other things out there. So there is a lot. This is a big conversation. And that is why this is a series, because we'll continue to unfold some of these things over time and as we're going through different conversations. But yeah, what was the, oh, I also want to say about doctors. I think that it is very easy to do the same thing that you've always done. And the job of an OBGYN is not to educate anyone on the female body. Like an OBGYN is a trained surgeon. That's their function. Like that's what they want to do is perform surgery because that's what they paid to go to medical school to do.
Mhm.
They're not nutritionists. They're not fertility experts or anything like that. So to
They're not
think that
even
they
necessarily hormone specialists
and they're
because
not hormone specialists. So to
I
think that they would want to
yeah.
like even care, they're like, no, you don't want to get pregnant. Take this thing that this rep came by my office, said this is great. Yeah, it has side effects. So does every other pharmaceutical. Good day. There's not a thought about it. And
Mhm.
but that's kind of the problem, right? Like, let's put more thought into this than
Yeah.
just like everybody's doing it,
Mhm.
right? Because I mean, birth control has been on the rise over the last 30, 40 years. Our mom, before she had kids, like it wasn't popular
Yeah,
30,
I think it
40 years
really
ago.
yeah, I think it was invented or really like came to the market in the 50s or 60s, which kind of then followed the sexual revolution and rise in feminism and things like that. And so I think that a really, really great resource for this whole topic and like how birth control even got to started and then developed to where it is today is, I've mentioned it on our podcast before, but it's a documentary called The Business of Birth Control.
Mhm.
It is. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see it because it was hard
Yes.
to access last year. I don't know if it's available on like Amazon streaming now, but it wasn't before. It was only available on their website, which is thebusinessofbirthcontrol.com. I think that's the website. I'm pretty sure, but we could link it in the show notes because I highly recommend it. It's so eye-opening of to see like where it started, and like there was a huge actually feminist movement when it first came to market of women demanding for it to be for the birth control pill, the original one, to be taken off the market because there were women dying left and right from the pill. And it was, they were like pleading and begging with Congress to do something to keep this off of the market. And they didn't listen because it is a business. And
Mhm.
that's,
Yep.
we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here, but
It is no, you're absolutely right though. It is a business, and that is why, it's an industry in and of itself. And
yeah, it's a
ha
billion-dollar industry. So it's like these pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars
Mhm.
at the sacrifice of our health. And
Mhm.
they sell it to us in this pretty package of, you don't want to get pregnant, then you have to take this pill. And so I think you're kind of wanted to introduce this episode as like, if you feel some hostility towards us kind of railing against that, like we want to share that there is another way. This
Mhm.
isn't like, we have been sold a package that the pill or an IUD is the only way, and that isn't true. That there is another way, and it might sound like I've explained fertility awareness method to people before, and the response I got is like, yeah, but people don't want to do all that. That's a lot of work. And the thing is that's so like, I think you don't realize when you first hear it is it might sound like a lot more work than popping a pill, but it is no side effect free.
Yeah.
And it is so empowering. Like we
Mhm.
want to shine light into this conversation because we want to just really share a testimony of empowerment, that as women, like we can all be, you know, we don't have to control, our fertility cycle, that we shut it all down and prevent it from doing what it needs to do to get pregnant. We can ride the waves and feel empowered that we know where we're at in our cycle. And you know what's really empowering? If you don't want to get pregnant and you know you're in the 6 days of the month that you could, that as an empowered and informed woman, you can be like, I'm not doing anything to get pregnant during this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's that's what I just think, that there's a side of it that people don't necessarily realize until have really been educated on fertility awareness and the female anatomy, and start practicing it. Like I love it. I mean, I hate my cycle. I shouldn't say I hate my cycle. Hormones are a bee at times. It's hard
That
being a
is not a
woman.
very nice way to talk about what the Lord designed.
It's
I wanted to
hard.
mention on this episode, I thought of an analogy when I was driving in the car this morning. Okay. So you know how when you work super hard to cook a delicious meal for your family, amazing. You spend all this time, it's perfect. Everything about it's so good. And then you sit down at the table and your kids look at it and they go,
I
you know how
do
that
know that
happens?
feeling.
And then
Yes.
you know how you feel inside? It's this mixture of like you're hurt, you're mad, you're angry, you're upset. All right. Now let's take that example and let's look at God, Yahweh, the creator of life. He created us perfectly in his own image. Well, I wouldn't say perfectly, right? Because we're not perfect. You know, we don't act perfect, that is. But he created man and woman in his own image. He formed all of our organs. This is amazing symphony. It's so incredible. And now we're here on earth alive and we're women and we're like, yeah, yeah, give me the pill. I'm going to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
alter this. Or yeah, yeah, I don't like my nose. I don't like my boobs. I don't like anything about me. I'm going to get surgery or I'm going to, we mutilate ourselves in many ways, physically and emotionally. And I don't know, it was just something that I was thinking about from that perspective. And how must the Lord feel when he looks down on a woman and he's like, I created your cycle perfectly. And people have even written books about it called for taking charge of your fertility. And they explain exactly how I created your incredible 28-day cycle. And we're like, nah, nah, just give me a pill. It's like
It's the
the same
equivalent of
thing.
saying, "I want chicken nuggets."
Exactly. I just wanted cheese. That's what we're
Yeah, no,
doing.
that's true, yeah.
We are and it's terrible, and it does seem complicated at first. I remember when I first read the fertility awareness method and I was learning about charting, and I was constantly texting you pictures of charts, like, "What does this mean?" And
Yeah,
it was a little bit hard to figure out, but I'll tell you what, there's hundreds of apps out there now.
yeah.
People can just use an app, ladies, just use an app that's tells you everything. Now,
Mhm,
granted, that's not going to be as empowered as it would be if you figured it out, but I've actually learned over time that I can track from cervical fluid, like we were talking about. Like, I
mm,
don't even temp anymore. I just track my cervical fluid. And that is a good measure for me, but I have become more in tune with my body over time. So at first, it's a struggle. At first, it's not that easy, but the more in tune, the more we tune into our intuition and learn our body, it's amazing. It
mhm,
actually is amazing. Like, I know when my body is getting pregnant because of how I feel. I can tell. And
mhm.
it's this crazy thing that just happens when you choose to listen to your body versus listen to someone tell you to take a pill. But it comes over time, and that's why we weren't ready to have this conversation now in our lives, right? Like, publicly, because we ourselves have learned over the years to get to this point where we're, in tune with our bodies and what's going on. So, I definitely want to encourage those listening, check out Taking Charge of Your Fertility or The Fifth Vital Sign or another book that talks about fertility awareness method. And also, you said something when you were explaining it and you're talking about empowerment. Listen to the difference between these words: birth control, fertility awareness.
Mhm.
Control, awareness.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Birth control, fertility awareness. It's like you can try to control with pharma, or you can just be aware. Learn how
Yeah.
to be aware of where you are in your cycle, and then you can make the decision with discernment from the Lord. Because I don't, we're not going to get into the conversation about open womb or anything like that, but that is a conversation we could have. Maybe we will in this series talk about what that means to have an open womb. Many women feel convicted not to control anything, and other women feel like the Lord has provided us with awareness
Mhm,
about our cycle for a reason, and it's to open the womb when the woman's body and soul and spirit and all of that feels in alignment with having a baby. And you're entitled to have, your own opinion, and you meaning Rachel and everyone listening. And me. Like, all of us can, we're not going to tell you, like, just stop doing everything and don't do anything. That's the whole point of fertility awareness, is you're learning
right.
about your body.
Yeah.
Uh, but let's talk about the pill and how it works, because what are we told? The pill is just some hormones and it just regulates everything and
Yeah.
your whole life will be better, right? Like how I don't even remember how it was sold to me. I went on birth control as a teenager. I had terrible periods. You know, we talked about last episode how during your period, during menstruation, it is a time where you should rest. Do you remember
Mhm.
how I would just lay in bed and you and
Cry.
our brother would try to beat me up and didn't understand it at first? And you're like, "What? She's just trying to like get out of doing anything." And thinking back on those times, I thought something was wrong with me. But now I realize that it was just new,
Well,
you
yeah, and
know?
I also think that there is an element of when a girl starts her period, for the first time, the first few years,
Mhm.
that this whole system of hormones and the endocrine system and all that, it's not mature. So things are a lot more intense because I
Yes.
also had, and I think this is very common, very, very heavy periods, like crazy compared to what
Mhm.
my
Yep.
period is today. Sometimes I think about that. And I've heard it from young girls as well before. So I think that, yeah, there's an element of like, it's new. Like it is kind of crazy to think about that you are a human with just like you're bleeding out of a hole in your body constantly and you have to just like survive. Like if you
And you
just
have
think about the
crazy cramps too. If you think
yes, it's
about what's happening with
painful.
the uterus and how much it's cramping now that you've been through physiological birth, I'm sure you can really relate to this. Could you imagine being 12 years old and having contractions? Because
I
that's
know.
basically what's happening to you.
Yeah.
And so it's no wonder why there is this system, this medical system that has targeted teenagers and said, "Oh, well, we can give you a pill to stop that, to stop the heavy periods and the heavy bleeding and the horrible cramps. Like we can take care of that for you." And then they get you into the
Medical
pharmaceutical
system.
cycle, into the medical system because now you're taking something that's going to have side effects and then you're going to be going to the doctor for those side effects and then on and on and on, right?
And you're suppressing important hormones like estrogen and
Mhm.
progesterone
Mhm.
from a very early age when you're actually still you're still developing, you're still like puberty isn't over yet. Like I think
Yes.
I got my period around 12 or 13 and you were about the same age too, right?
I got my period pretty young. I was like 10, maybe
Really?
9. Yeah, I was very young. I remember being super young. But it was, yeah, so it's tough in the beginning, and here's the thing, I wanna encourage if you're a mom and you have daughters, I wanna encourage you to talk about this stuff with your girls young. Like, I already am talking to my 4-year-old about the uterus and eggs and fallopian tubes, and, like, I'm also a nerd about this stuff, passionate about it, clearly, but I think it's important if we fully understand, if our girls fully understand what's going on and that it's normal, and then we can find some natural ways to support them, we can bypass these teenage years of getting them on birth control. Like
Mhm.
if I had known as a teenager that evening primrose oil was a natural thing that could help with my cramps, or if I was taught that cramps are, you can just embrace it, that it's the uterus contracting and correlate it to something else. I don't know. Maybe I would have had more understanding about it, but and this is, by the way, this is not me blaming our mom for anything. She is this is no fault of hers, like I was sucked in by the doctor too when I went to go to the doctor that they're like, "Oh, well, we could just fix it." And I didn't know enough. And we
Mhm.
also didn't Google things back then because I'm old.
Yeah.
Right? Like, can't just go online and ask the internet, is this safe or what's
I
gonna
don't know.
happen to me?
I think Ask Jeeves existed by the time I went. because I started my period, I think, around 12, and then I was put on the pill for heavy periods. And I remember being told, and possible endometriosis. Like it sounds like endometriosis, but they never did a scan. They never did anything. Just because I had heavy
Mm,
periods and
mhm,
painful cramps, they said that I probably have endometriosis. They told that to, I was 15. They said to a 15-year-old, and that the only treatment for endometriosis anyway, so like it doesn't really matter whether you have it or not because the treatment is hormonal birth control.
mhm.
And so yeah, like I agree with you. Like we don't, it's no fault of at all of our moms because like imagine being a mother and hearing that like that your daughter has a this like reproductive medical issue and that the treatment is this pill.
Mhm.
And it sounds like the right thing to do. And it's like honestly, it's kind of sick because that's not the right thing to do. And it really like I will try to give, you know, doctors who say that the benefit of the doubt that they believe
Mhm.
that the best thing for endometriosis is the pill, but there's just so much more um evidence on other
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But here's the thing, like it doesn't matter because I don't need to we don't need to get in a conversation on endometriosis. We're not qualified to speak to a illness we don't even have because that's the point. I don't have endometriosis.
Yes,
And they
yes.
shouldn't be putting girls, children, because that's what a 15-year-old is, on a medication for something that they don't have and that they didn't test me for because you have to
Mhm.
do an ultrasound to determine if someone has endometriosis. So I'm not saying anything like I don't know really what should be done for endometriosis, but I do know that you shouldn't be giving someone a treatment for something that they don't have when you don't know that they have it.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about the different forms of birth control. The pill is the simplest one, the one that they put most girls on as teenagers when you go to the OBGYN. And of course, any young woman that goes to an OB who is known to be sexually active, when they go and they ask them, they're going to try to put them on the pill because they are not educated on fertility awareness. Actually, funny enough, I had an OB when we had Brooke. Well, before we got pregnant with Brooke, and I had an IUD, and he was the one who removed it. And he said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Fertility awareness method." And he goes, "You know what I call that? Parents." That's what he thought. That was his opinion on fertility awareness method, is that everybody just gets pregnant because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of what we're trying to point out here is like, you're not going to go to OB and they're going to support you. Maybe they will, some of them, hopefully. Hopefully there's a good one out there. But don't count on OBGYN being supportive of you telling them that you're doing FAM because they are indoctrinated into the birth control matrix. And that's
Yeah.
just is what it is. So we have the pill. There is also the Nuva ring. I hope to God it's not still on the market, but it probably is. And that is a silicone ring that squishes flat and you stick up in there. Guess what? I did that. Can you believe that? It's so dumb. When I think back, like who even was I? Why did I do any of this stuff? That gave me severe so let's just go through that. Pill, got on it. I had heavy periods. I also felt emotionally unstable. Well, guess what? I was a teenager. Of course, I was emotionally unstable. Like, that's part of it. So I go on these pills, but that just makes it worse. Like, I just feel not myself. Change pills bunch of times. Still don't feel right. Go on this Nuva ring. Feel even worse. Start to develop cramping in my vaginal canal. Literal cramping.
Yeah, I used to have that too.
One day, have excruciating pain. I thought my appendix burst. Go to the hospital. It was a cyst that ruptured. They tell me, "Oh, you have new ring? That's known for causing ovarian cysts."
But they didn't tell you that before they prescribed you the NuvaRing? They didn't say that
Nope,
your ovarian cysts are a side effect?
nope. So that was when I'm like, all right, well, then what do I do? I've already taken all the pills. I'm not doing that again. I've already done this. And my doctor at the time, she said, "Oh, you've got to get an IUD. The IUD is the best. I have one. I have the Mirena. You should get this." Literally, the doctor herself had one, according to her. Talks me into this, tells me, "Oh, it's great. You'll never have to think about a thing again." Doesn't explain the fact that I am now officially messing myself up into oblivion because those hormones don't stay localized. They spread throughout your whole body and they are synthetic, totally synthetic. So I get this thing put in, which is very painful, by the way, because they have to go in. It's shaped like a T, like this. And the arms are folded, the arms are folded down when they insert it into your cervix up into your uterus, and then once it gets in there, the little arms pop out, and it has fishing wire string basically that goes all the way out, and then they trim the strings, sweep them to the side, and send you on your way. So they basically put a plug in you, and you're just told like, "Oh, this just is going to prevent pregnancy. It's fine." I go home. It is painful for a couple weeks and does not feel good. I did not like it at all from day one. Over the next couple of weeks, I develop acne. You've known me since the day I was born. Well, not the day I was born,
Say I was
since
born.
the day you were born. I've never had acne in my life. And my skin was terrible. And I called the office and said, I need to talk to someone. I need to get this out. And they were like, oh no, just give it more time. Your body, your hormones need to regulate. They're talking as if my hormones are benefiting from this instead of being totally wrecked. And I leave it in for longer. And then over the years, it kind of builds up, but I don't realize what's going on, right? Like, I don't know that what is happening to me is necessarily from this because we don't think about it. It's inside the body. You're never thinking about it. You don't, unless it comes up. And Mirena was the worst one for me because over time, it's almost like the hormones, the synthetic hormones. I want to very cautiously say when I say hormones and I'm talking about birth control, I'm not talking about our body's hormones. I'm talking about synthetic man-made hormones that are created in a lab based on the structure of our natural hormones. So I was crying all the time, which I've always been a very emotional person, so nobody thought anything of this. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is just always how you've been." Crying every day, feeling upset, just Mike likes to use the word crazy, which no woman likes to hear, but just totally out of it. But the thing that really did it for me was I started to fantasize about killing myself. And I've never been suicidal or struggled with depression. And so for me to just like lay in bed at night and fantasize about how I was going to kill myself, that didn't seem right. That almost seems like possession, if you ask me, or some kind of oppression that a voice is telling me, like, make a plan to go kill yourself. Does that sound normal to you? Because that doesn't seem normal to me.
No, not at all. And what's crazy is that this is a side effect of hormonal birth control and like depression and suicidal ideations is. And what really has kind of like rocked me is I was, as mentioned, put on the pill when I was 15, and I struggled even before this. I struggled with anxiety and depression pretty much since I started puberty, which is interesting. I'm sure it
Yeah.
has something to do with those hormones because that is the thing is estrogen is linked to our serotonin levels and which plays into depression. That's why one of the side effects of hormonal birth control is depression. But I developed, as you know, eating disorders in my teenage years. And then there was a point in time when I was probably around 17 that my depression was at an all-time high, and I was also having suicidal ideations like you mentioned as well, and fantasizing um about suicide, and even planning attempts and things like that. And while for so long, I always tied it of, oh, I was very mentally ill. And I did, I, it was a whole journey on getting treatment, psychological treatment and help, and a healing that took me a really long time. Excuse me. It took me years and years and years. But what kind of why I even wanted to mention this as you're saying that, and you asked me if that sounds normal, is no, it doesn't sound normal. But coming to the realization of like what you're describing about this being a side effect of hormonal birth control is, would I possibly not have gone through that as a
Mm,
17-year-old if I
mhm.
wasn't put on the pill 2 years before?
Yeah.
I always just thought of it as, oh, I was mentally ill. That's why I went through all of that. And
Mhm.
while I maybe would have been mentally ill either way, would it have gotten that bad
Yeah.
if I had never been on the pill? And that is just something to think about, and why we want to share our stories while also sharing information about these contraceptives and their side effects, is so many women like go through things like this, and we never correlate it. We never connect it back
Yeah.
to the birth control, because
Yeah.
all we're told is that con- all it's doing is preventing you from getting pregnant. We don't realize how it impacts our mental health. And like you said, like,
Yeah.
that wasn't normal for you. That wasn't anything that you had ever felt before. And then, if you want to finish that story,
Yeah.
you eventually,
Yeah. So, and there is an interesting part in there that I'll get to with this story on what happens when you go to your doctor and you're on
yeah,
birth control and you tell them I'm thinking about killing myself or I'm depressed, right? So I
right.
wake up one day. I wake up and I'm like, I got to get this thing out. This is the cause. I knew. I felt like the Lord came to me and said, "This IUD is what is causing you to want to kill yourself and end your life. Get it out." And I woke up and I said, "I'm getting this thing out." And I found a OB close to where I lived at the time, went there, told her what was going on. She didn't press me too hard, I feel like. She attempted to get it out and couldn't. And she was like, "I just can't get it out. I don't know why, but I can't." And she didn't have an ultrasound machine on site to, like, be able to look for it to see what was going on, but why she couldn't get it pulled out with the strings or whatever the case might be. So, I leave that office, and I was on that mission. Like, when I make a decision about something, I'm for sure, right? Like,
Mm.
I called my insurance company at the time, and I said, "I need you to help me find an OBGYN that can take me right now." And they did. They actually, just so you know, like, you're paying a gajillion billion dollars for health insurance. Have them do things like this for you because that's what you're paying for. They found me a practice that had an ultrasound machine. I go there. It's a male OB, which was the first time I'd ever had a male OB to that point in my life. But I was desperate. I'm like, "I don't care. I will let a gorilla tear this thing out of me."
Maybe don't do that.
So, I tell him what's going on and why I want it out, and the audacity of this man says, "Oh, you don't need to get that taken out. You need to go to a therapist and get on antidepressants."
My gosh.
I legit almost punched this guy in the face. I did in my mind, and I don't promote violence, so
This is the
But like the
definition of
audacity,
gaslighting.
it's medical gaslighting. So if you are experiencing this, ladies listening, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and you go to your care provider and they tell you need to be on antidepressants, walk out of there. They are not for you. Go to someone else who will listen to you because this is messed up. So I tell him, absolutely not. I want it out. Absolutely not. And he's like, all right. So he uses the ultrasound, he finds it. He can't get it out either. And he uses all these tools. They have this brush scraping tool to scrape it out of your uterus.
That had to have been painful.
It was not fun, and I hadn't had any children, so I'm not used to anything to do with my uterus aside from having these contraptions put in there. So he's like, "Sorry, I can't get it out. I think the only next step for you is the hospital." And so I go to the hospital. I'm like, "I'm getting this thing out." That woman was the nicest one of all of these people. She was very like, "I'm going to try to help you out here." Takes a look at everything and all that, and then is like, "Listen, the bad news is this is embedded to your uterine wall. I cannot get it out today. I cannot remove it. We have to surgically remove it." But then here was the worst part, right? She goes, "Well, when I take this out, you could just get the copper IUD. It doesn't have any hormones and it'll help you prevent pregnancy and whatever, whatever." And I at the time was like, "Yeah, okay." She's like, "Oh, well, then you won't experience any pain because it'll be done when you're under." That sounded like such a dream, right? Don't not to have to experience it getting placed. So I had it removed, surgically removed, and was literally a different person. The next day, that day, I don't even remember what time I got out of surgery, whatever it was, but I felt free. I felt like I literally had my whole personality had been cloaked by something.
Wow.
And the next day, I was just calmer. Not because I had surgery, but
Mm.
I just was calmer and more at peace and just even, and I never after that had another suicidal thought again. So tell me it wasn't from that IUD. I actually called the manufacturer of Mirena and filed a report about what happened to me because this is the other problem with this industry is unless we report things, the statistics are not going to be accurate.
Mhm.
And how many women experience symptoms and actually call the company?
Yeah.
Most of them do not. It's kind of like VAERS data, right? Like
Right, right.
it's only a small percentage of people that are even calling to report an adverse vaccine reaction. The same thing applies here,
Mhm.
but I called to report that. So they placed Paragard, the copper IUD. And for a short period of time, because I came off of Mirena, I was doing better. But about a year later, maybe a year and a half, I started having heart palpitations. And I felt like my heart was racing all the time. And there was a lot of stuff that was going on. So I thought maybe it was anxiety. Like maybe I just was anxious. I literally went to a therapist to see if talk therapy would help me. I stopped drinking my random dirty chai lattes and caffeine, but I wasn't getting better. So I started to Google some of my symptoms and came across a group on Facebook called Copper Toxicity from IUDs, something like that. Join this group. Start reading people's stories. I'm like, this is me. This is literally me. And that was when I went back to the OB and it was the same story, right? Get this thing out of me. This is what it's doing to me. And that was the male doctor that said, "What are you going to do for birth control?" And I was married at this point, and I'm like, fertility awareness method.
Mhm.
And that was the last time I was ever on birth control. That was 6 years ago, maybe. And, yeah, that was the end of that era. And so that's why I say it's taken time to be able to have this conversation because when you're in it, even when you're experiencing it, you don't fully understand the ramifications of it. And even now, I've just recently come into the understanding of what truly happens with an IUD.
Mhm.
That You literally, the egg that you drop every month could still become fertilized and drop into your uterus, but it is so inhospitable because of the copper, which has created inflammation, and that inflammation doesn't stay localized to your uterus either. You can have inflammation throughout your body because of it. It destroys that embryo. So, I mean, it's honestly horrifying when I think about it. Like, how
Mhm.
sad. How many potential babies were ripped apart in my womb because I chose to put an artificial, piece of copper that doesn't even make sense. It's an internal organ for a reason. Like, we should not be, we meaning me, I should not have been messing with my body and God's design for my body by inserting something into it. And if that makes sense, then so does taking something orally. It's the same thing, you know?
Mhm.
Like, we're messing with God's design for our bodies and for our hormones and for our health. And there's ramifications to it, whether we want there to be or not.
Yeah.
I actually pulled a bunch of information on side effects for birth control. Blood clots is a big one. So, when I was considering us doing this topic, I actually asked Audrey, who she was on from A Joyful Birth. I asked her to poll her audience if she didn't mind to see if anybody would be willing to share their stories with us on the podcast. And there were a number of women who replied to her ask saying, I experienced blood clots, or my cousin had a blood clot from her birth control. And they play it down that it's like 1 in 10,000 or something small, but it sounds like it is much higher. There's also a lot of cardiovascular risks. There are bone density risks, prolonged use of hormonal contraceptives. It has an impact on our bone density, like we were talking about before. Mood
Mhm.
changes. It changes your libido. You become
Yeah.
nutrient deplete. It can affect vitamins. Get this. You know what specific vitamins birth control depletes? B6, B12, and folate. Those are like the 3 most important things when you're pregnant.
Mhm.
And we're
Yeah,
depleting them.
that's what's interesting of like you get off the pill and then you like start trying to get pregnant because that's what most women do is they get off the pill and then they try to get pregnant right away and to go into a pregnancy without stores of those hormones
And
like
vitamins and nutrients, yeah.
or yeah, I didn't mean hormones. I meant vitamins. Yeah. But could that possibly contribute to like increase in morning sickness and things like that?
Mhm. Some other ones that you might like we might not think about as women that, we're like, "Oh, yeah, we know that it impacts our mood." But did you know that it can impact your eyesight? There's a link between changes in vision. I
Mm,
think about how horrible my vision got once I was 16. I mean, my
yeah.
vision went from being like I barely needed any readers. I had like a negative 0.25 prescription for when I was driving, and I went all the way up to a 4, a negative 4 rapidly when I started taking birth control. It
Oh.
changes our vaginal fluid too.
Hmm.
Like, the way that we smell is different. And we talk about this, or the notorious they on the internet talks about how women, it's been proven that apparently we are attracted to people in a different way when we are on birth
Oh
control, that we don't
yeah.
even.
There's a study on it that because it changes our sense of smell. I think that's what you meant by smell, because I thought you meant something else at first.
Well, I do mean that.
Yeah.
The way that our
Right. That
vaginal
we
fluid
smell.
smells changes too,
Yeah. So there's a study that it
and our
changes
pheromones. That's
Yeah,
really
our
more what I meant.
sense of smell, yeah, like an automatic process, and that apparently women who aren't on birth control, you have this like automatic process of using your sense of smell that you don't even realize that um makes you attracted to a partner, and usually a partner that even is like biologically compatible with you and for having children. And that apparently women who have been on hormonal birth control, this, system is essentially like shut off. And that there is been a lot of cases of women coming off of the pill once they're married, and then they're not attracted to their partner. And so there's, just a possible link between who that kind of system
And by
is
attracted, you
suppressed.
mean the pheromones of the other
Right,
person.
exactly. Not like physically attractive, but then the end result is in divorce. Like there's a higher divorce rate of women who have been on hormonal birth control, is essentially the
Mhm.
message.
That was the conclusion of that study.
Right.
The birth control also impacts your liver and can cause liver tumors, which not for nothing, our livers are weak as it is. So to weaken it even more is pretty bad. And then a lot of women will experience headaches and migraines. This was another common theme that came up when we asked women what they experienced was having bad migraines. And I thought back and guess what? There was a period of time that I totally forgot about that I was experiencing migraines and I'd never experienced migraines before. And guess what they did? Put me on a medication for it. But the medication made me really sick. So I only took it like twice. And then I was like, I'm never taking that again. Or maybe it was once. So look at that. Take something, causes a problem, take something else. It impacts our weight. Why does it impact our weight? Because we've just totally disrupted our natural hormones and that cortisol that we were talking about before. So there are a lot of side effects besides just these. And we're going to dive into more birth control stories over the coming weeks. But the moral of the story is birth control is poison. It is toxic for the natural process of women's bodies. I'm just going to say it. That is what it is. It is not the best thing for our health. If we are sold it, it's a lie. And I think that it's time that we have this conversation. So there it is.
So like put it all out there.
Put it all out there. I mean, my experience, that's all I have to say after what I've gone through is I've been poisoned. That's what it feels like. I was poisoned. And what about my health and my life was stolen because of it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I hope that this helps somebody. I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking to the air.
Well, you're talking to me. We've already
It's
talked about
true.
this so many times, though.
But you and I have been through this and we've been through the worst of it. And thank God for you because you introduced me to FAM and you were the one who was like, you got to read this book,
Yeah.
Fertility, taking charge of your fertility. You got to read this. And listen, ladies, just read it. I don't have to explain anything to you because you'll read it all from someone who's way more accredited than I am. And
Yeah.
she explains why it doesn't help with these health problems like PCOS and endometriosis. She explains it in the book, so definitely read that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's not going, like, fertility awareness method isn't going to cure anything, but just like the pill isn't going to cure anything.
mhm,
It's a matter of taking charge of
your
your
fertility.
fertility. No, but taking charge of your own health, because to go back to kind of one of the original points of our message that I said is your cycle and ovulation is important whether you want to have children or not. Like this is a health marker. And to suppress ovulation is suppressing part of your health.
Mhm,
And that's why there's so many side effects, and some of the side effects are very severe as death. And that's just a fact. These are listed on any birth control insert. And like you said, not everything is reported. And I think the conversation that we're trying to start now, and we're going to have more conversations with women who've had negative experiences with birth control, is how much of us women can relate to each other and to hear ourselves and each other's stories from symptoms that we did not realize were from our birth control. Like you sharing about what you experienced with an IUD and how it affected your mental health, that there are so many of us women, including me, that have struggled with mental health and never contributed it to our hormonal birth control.
mhm,
And we want to be healthy. We want to take care of these bodies that God gave us. And the medical system is just, the solution is pill after pill after pill, that you get on the birth control pill, and then, oh, that's giving you depression, so get on a antidepressant. And it's there's another way. Like, it doesn't have to be that way.
yeah, totally. I was thinking of some parallels while you were saying that. It's like when someone starts having seizures after they have been vaccinated and then now they're on seizure medication, like there are so many cycles
Mm-hmm.
that we get into because of taking one thing and it causes something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that this does empower women to learn about your body and just know that there is another way you can learn about how your body functions without using suppressants or other things to manipulate it the way that pharma tells us to,
Yeah.
right? I think that's
Yeah.
our message.
Yep.
All right. Well, stay tuned. More to come on this topic, and you're going to hear some interesting stories. And I'm sure a lot of women will hear themselves in their stories, like you said. So thank you, Ray. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you for tuning in and for being on this journey with us. If you'd like to follow along outside the podcast, join the mission on Instagram and Facebook at The Radiant Mission, or you can watch on YouTube at The Radiant Mission, or by searching for, don't search for Rachel Smith because you'll never find us, right? Search for Rebecca Toomey or The Radiant Mission or TRM, and you will find us. And today we're going to close with something positive. 3 John 1, verse 2. Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. And we're wishing you a radiant week, and we'll see you next time. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.